Chapter 14, The Fourth Part of Darkness. "What happened to you?" Wendell whispered, when Harvey reached the bottom of the lawn. "I thought we were meeting at midnight." "I got waylaid," Harvey said. He had intended to tell Wendell what had just transpired, but his friend was obviously nervous enough without being told about Lily's fate. Harvey slipped the 3 survivors of the Ark into his pocket and resolved to only speak of the encounter when he and Wendell were safely away from this terrible place. Just one thing stood between them and that ambition: the wall of mist. Now as ever it seemed innocent enough, but that was an illusion, of course, like so many things in Mr. Hood's kingdom. "We have to be very organized about this," Harvey said to Wendell. "Once we're in the wall, we lose our sense of direction, so we have to be sure to keep walking in a straight line and not let the mist turn us around." "How do we do that?" said Wendell. "I think one of us should go in first, and the other keep a hold of his hand." "Me," said Wendell eagerly. "I want to be first." "No problem. Then I'll keep my back to the house and keep guiding you. Who knows, maybe the wall's so thin you'll just be able to pull me through." "We can hope," said Wendell. "Are you ready?" Harvey asked, extending his hand. Wendell took it. "Whenever you are," he said. "Then let's get out of here." Wendell nodded and stepped into the mist. Instantly, Harvey felt his grip tighten. "Don't let go," Wendell said, his voice already remote, although he was just a pace away. "Just keep walking," Harvey said, as they reached arm's length. "Any sign of—" Before he could finish his question, a noise from the house behind him sealed his lips. He glanced back. The front door was open, and a light was burning in the hall, throwing into silhouette the figure rushing down the porch steps. It was Mrs. Griffin. The noise he had heard was not from her lips, however. Nothing human could make such a din. He saw Mrs. Griffin glance up toward the roof as she hurried down the lawn, and following her gaze, saw the noisemaker rising against the stars. He knew its name, even though he couldn't see its face. Hood had 4 servants, and he had met only 3, Rictus, Jive, and Mar. Here was the 4th, Karna, the tooth-stealer, Karna, the devourer, Karna, the beast Mrs. Griffin had hoped Harvey would never meet. "Back to the house, child!" Mrs. Griffin yelled as the din of vast wings filled the air. "Quickly! Quickly!" Harvey pulled on Wendell's arm, yelling to him as he did so. But Wendell had a whiff of freedom in his nostrils and wasn't about to give it up. "What are you waiting for?" Mrs. Griffin yelled. "Get away from there, or it'll take off your head!" Harvey glanced up at the swooping beast and knew this was no lie. Karna's jaws were wide enough to snap him in half with a single bite. But he couldn't leave Wendell in the mist. They'd begun this adventure together, and that was how they would finish it, dead or alive. He had no choice but to step into the mist himself and hope that Wendell had snatched a glimpse of the world outside and could pull him through to the street. As he took that step, he heard Mrs. Griffin say something about leading the way. Then he was blinded by the chill of the mist, and the sound of her voice became a garbled whisper. Karna's shrieks were not hushed, however. They pierced the murk, skewering Harvey's thoughts the way its teeth would skewer his head if the beast caught up with him. "Wendell!" Harvey yelled. "It's coming for us!" He caught a glimpse of a figure up ahead of him, then of Wendell's face smeared by the mist, and turning to say, "There's no way out." "There has to be. I can't find it," Wendell said, his reply almost drowned out by the din of Karna's shrieks. Harvey glanced back the way he had come, more afraid not to know how close the creature was than to see it, however terrifying the sight. A swirling veil of mist swirled in front of him, but he glimpsed Karna's form as the beast descended. It was the most monstrous of the brood, its skin rotted and stretched over barbed and polished bone, its throat a nest of snaky tongues, its jaws set with hundreds of teeth. This is the end, Harvey thought. I've only been alive 10 years and 5 months, and I'm going to have my head bitten off. Then from the corner of his eye, a strange sight. Mrs. Griffin's arms reaching into the mist and dropping Blue Cat to the ground. "He's got a good sense of direction," Harvey heard her say. "Follow him! Follow him!" He didn't need a second invitation, nor did Blue Cat. Tail up, it padded off, and Harvey hauled on Wendell's arm to drag him in pursuit. The cat was quick, but so was Harvey. He kept his eyes glued on that bright tail, even when the rush of wings behind him announced that Karna had entered the mist and was almost upon them. 2 strides, 3 strides, 4. And now the mist seemed to be thinning. He heard Wendell whooping for joy. "The street!" he yelled. "I see it!" The next moment Harvey saw it too, the pavements wet with rain and shining in the lamplight. Now he dared to look back, and there was Karna, its jaws a yard from them. He let go of Wendell's arm and pushed his friend towards the street, ducking as he did so. Karna's lower jaw scraped his spine, but the beast was moving too fast to check itself, and instead of wheeling around to scoop up its quarry, it flew on, out into the real world. Wendell was already there. Harvey joined him a moment later. "We did it!" Wendell yelled. "We did it!" "So did Karna," Harvey said, pointing up at the beast as it rose against the cloudy sky and turned to come back for them. "It wants to drive us back inside," Harvey said. "I'm not going," Wendell cried. "Never! I'm never going in there again." Karna heard his defiance, its blazing eyes fixed on him, and it came down like a thunderbolt, its shriek echoing through the midnight streets. "Run!" Harvey said. But Karna's stare had rooted Wendell to the spot. Harvey grabbed hold of him and was about to make a run for it when he heard the beast's cry change. Triumph became doubt, doubt became pain, and suddenly Karna wasn't swooping, but following, holes opening in its wings, as though a horde of invisible moths was eating their fabric. It labored to climb the air again, but its wounded wings refused their duty, and seconds later it struck the street so hard it bit off a dozen of its tongues and scattered 100 teeth at the boy's feet. The fall didn't kill, however. Though agonized by its wounds, it hauled itself up to the spiky crutches of its wings and began to drag itself back towards the wall. Even now, in this wretched state, it was ferocious, and with snaps to the right and left drove Harvey and Wendell out of its path. "It can't survive out here," Wendell realized aloud. "It's dying." Harvey wished he had some weapon to keep the beast from returning to safety, but he had to be content with the sight of its defeat. If it had not wanted their flesh so badly, he thought, it wouldn't have come after them at such speed, and brought this pain and humiliation upon itself. There was a lesson there, if he could only remember it. Evil, however powerful it seemed, could be undone by its own appetite. Then the creature was gone, and a curtain of mist drawn over its retreat. There was only one sign remaining of the mysteries that lay on the other side of the wall. The face of Blue Cat, gazing out at the world that he, like all the occupants of the holiday house, could never explore. His azure gaze met Harvey's for a moment. Then he looked back towards his prison, as though he heard Mrs. Griffin's summons, and with a sorrowful sigh turned and traipsed away. "Weird," he said, as he stared at the rainy streets. "It's as though I never left." "Is it?" said Harvey. He wasn't so sure. He felt different, marked by his adventure. "I wonder if we'll even remember we came here in a week's time." "Oh, I'll remember," Harvey said. "I've got a few souvenirs." He dug into his pocket in search of the figures from the ark. Even as he pulled them out, he felt them crumbling as the real world took its toll on them. "Illusions," he murmured, as they turned to dust and ran away between his fingers. "Who cares?" said Wendell. "It's time to go home, and that's no illusion." Chapter 14. time was. It took the boys an hour to reach the center of town, and there, given that their houses lay in opposite directions, they parted company. They exchanged addresses before they did so, promising to contact the other in a day or two, so that they could each support each other's account of the holiday house. It would be difficult to make people believe all that had happened to them, but they'd perhaps have a better chance if two voices told the same tale. "You know what you did back there," Wendell said just before they parted. "You saved my life." "You would have done the same for me," Harvey said. Wendell looked doubtful. "I might have wanted to," he said, somewhat abashed, "but I've never been very brave." "We escaped together," Harvey said. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Really? Really?" Wendell brightened at this. "Yeah," he said. "I guess that's right. Well, be seeing ya." And with that, they went on their separate ways. It was still several hours before daybreak, and the streets were virtually deserted. So for Harvey, it was a long, lonely trudge home. He was tired and a little saddened by his farewell to Wendell. But the thought of the welcome he'd get when he reached his own doorstep put a spring in his heels. Several times he wondered if he'd gone astray, because the streets he passed through were unfamiliar. One neighborhood was extremely fancy, the houses and cars parked outside them slicker than anything he had set his eyes on. Another was virtually a wasteland, the houses half rubble, the streets sown with rubbish. But his sense of direction served him well. As the east began to pale and the birds in the trees started their twitterings, he rounded the corner of his street. His weary legs broke into a joyful dash and brought him to the step, panting for breath and ready to fall into his parents' arms. He knocked on the door. There was no sound from the house at first, which didn't surprise him given the hour. He knocked again and again. Finally, a light was turned on, and he heard somebody coming to the door. "Who is it?" said his father from behind the closed door. "Do you know what time it is?" "It's me," said Harvey. Then came the sound of bolts being drawn aside, and the door opened a crack. "Who's me?" said the man, peering out at him. He looked kindly enough, Harvey thought, but it wasn't his father. This was a much older man, his hair almost white, his face thin. He had a badly trimmed mustache and a furrow of a frown. "What do you want?" he said. Before Harvey could reply, a woman's voice said, "Come away from the door." He couldn't see the second speaker yet, but he caught a glimpse of the wallpaper in the hallway and the pictures on the wall. To his relief, he saw that this was not his house at all. He'd obviously made a simple mistake and knocked on the wrong door. "I'm sorry," he said, backing away. "I didn't mean to wake you up." "Who are you looking for?" the man wanted to know, opening the door a little wider now. "Are you one of the Smith kids?" He started to dig in the pocket of his dressing gown and brought out a pair of spectacles. "He can't even see me properly," Harvey thought. Poor old man. But before the spectacles could reach the bridge of the man's nose, his wife appeared behind him, and Harvey's legs almost folded beneath him at the sight of her. She was old, this woman, her hair almost as colorless as her husband's, and her face even more lined and sorrowful. But Harvey knew that face better than any on earth. It was the first face he had ever loved. It was his mother. "Mom?" he murmured. The woman stopped and stared out through the open door at the boy standing on the step, her eyes filling up with tears. She could barely breathe the words she said next. "Harvey? Mom? Mom, is it you? Is it? Mom? Mom, it is you, isn't it?" By now the man had put on his spectacles and peered through them with his eyes wide. "It's not possible," he said. "This can't be Harvey." "It's him," said his wife. "It's our Harvey. He's come home." The man shook his head. "After all these years?" he said. "He'd be a man by now. he'd be a grown man. This is just a boy. It's him, I tell you. No, the man replied, angry now. It's some prank. Somebody's trying to break our hearts, as if they're not broken enough. He started to slam the door, but Harvey's mom caught hold of it. Look at him, she said. Look at his clothes. That's what he was wearing the night he left us. How do you know? You think I don't remember? It's 31 years ago, said Harvey's father, still staring at the boy on the step. This can't be. He faltered as slow recognition spread over his face. Oh, my Lord, he said, his voice dropping to a hoarse whisper. It is him, isn't it? I told you, his wife replied. Are you some kind of ghost? He asked Harvey. Oh, for goodness sake, Harvey's mom said. He's no ghost. She slipped past her husband and out onto the step. I don't know how it's possible, and I don't care, she said, opening her arms to Harvey. All I know is our little boy's come home to us. Harvey couldn't speak. There were too many tears in his throat, in his nose and his eyes. All he could do was stumble into his mother's arms. It was wonderful to feel her hand stroke his hair and her fingers wipe his cheeks. Oh, Harvey, 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 she sobbed. We thought we'd never see you again. She kissed him over and over again. We thought you'd gone forever. How is this possible? His father still wanted to know. I kept praying, his mother said. Harvey had another answer, though he didn't voice it. The moment he had set eyes on his mother, so changed, so sorrowful, it was instantly clear what a terrible trick Hood's house had played upon them all. For every day he had spent there, a year had gone by, here in the real world. Every morning while he had played in the spring warmth, months had passed. In the afternoon while he had lazed in the summer sun, the same. And those haunted twilights which had seemed so brief had been another span of months, as had the Christmas nights full of snow and presents. They had all slipped by so easily. And though he had only aged a month, his mom and dad had lived in sadness for 31 years, thinking that their little boy had gone forever. That had almost been the case. If he had remained in the House of Illusions, distracted by its pretty pleasures, a whole lifetime would have gone by here in the real world, and his soul would have become Hood's property. He would have joined the fish circling in the lake, and circling and circling. He shuddered at the thought. You're cold, sweetie, his mother said. Let's get you inside. He sniffed hard and cleared his tears with the back of his hand. I'm so tired, he said. I'll make a bed for you straight away. No, I want to tell you what happened before I go to sleep, Harvey replied. It's a long story, 31 years long.